I'm excited to be here. We have a lot to cover. What I hope you'll walk away with today is understanding that the fulcrum point, the key of bringing AI into organization, really is going to be around what you're able to do individually within your organizations now and in the future. So you're about the most important piece of this puzzle in terms of bringing this together. So that's what I want to talk to you about today, if it's okay with everybody here. So I know we have 30 minutes, and I want to get through the presentation so we can potentially have some more dialogue and some more Q&A. So at a high level, what I want to talk about is first, I want to level set on the situation in terms of where we are, not just today in this group, but talking about where we are as in terms of artificial intelligence, especially within the organizations and leadership teams and so forth and so on. The second piece of this is we're going to talk about what is AI, not in technical terms, but in terms that I think everyone is going to understand. There's a lot of misconceptions around artificial intelligence, what it is, what it's not, is it new, is it old, so forth and so on. Then we're going to start talking about two pieces of the puzzle, which is both critical and evolving, the role of financial data in AI. Okay, and then we're going to talk a little bit about from moving from reporting to orchestration, and then we'll get into QA. So one thing I want to make sure that we're all on the same page is I have a tendency to talk fast. It's my New York background. So if I am going too fast, please somebody speak up. I can't see everyone on this call. So I'm gonna trust and rely on your voice to tell me if I'm moving too fast. I like to have fun, so I make quite a lot of jokes. You'll even see as we go through the slides, I try to make things more palatable, not so tech heavy. And I also really love questions. I do not mind interruptions at all. I speak probably 2 to 3 times a week all over the world, really, about artificial intelligence and so forth and so on. And so, like I said, do not hesitate to jump in if you have questions. Does that sound good to everybody? All right, fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about the situation. Let's talk about where we are today. And I'm not familiar or sure about everyone's understanding of artificial intelligence, how much you use it, so forth and so on. So I'm going to take a very 30,000 foot approach to giving you a level set in terms of where we are. So first and foremost, let's look at some data. Okay, so 86% of executives all report that artificial intelligence is critical to the future of their business and their own personal success. Okay, so everybody wants to get to this point of the Jetsons. I hope everyone on this call is old enough to remember the Jetsons and so forth. But we're going to talk about that in reference because what we have to do is move. AI can help move executives and people from essentially the Flintstones. So essentially, like I said, 86% understand that they need to leverage artificial intelligence now and in the future, but only 8% are prepared or have a path to get there. Think about that. Think about that delta. Think about how wide that delta is between 8 to 84, 86%. It is massive. And I work with hundreds, if not thousands, of companies, and everybody is starting off in this state. They're starting off in the Flintstone state, wanting to move to a future state, which is the Jetsons. Okay? Makes sense to everybody thus far? Everyone's familiar with that? Fantastic. I'm going to keep moving forward. So, what is required to do that? There's one thing I'll talk about. In order for humans and AI to work together, it requires a shared framework, okay, for structure, context, and data. So, what does that mean? So, you think about it in terms of your cell phone or your computer and so forth, okay? For you to work with your computer to be on this, you need an operating system. That's for the human being and the device to work together to get to an outcome. AI is really no difference, especially for where we want to go. Human in the loop, you may have heard of that term before, but for humans and AI to work together, which is where we need to go, we need a shared framework, we need a shared structure, we need shared context, we need shared data. Does that make sense to everybody? I'm going to take that as a yes. Okay. So, what is the key point to all of this? What is required to get all of this in motion? Congratulations, it is you. It is every single person on this call. You are by far the most important piece of being able to bridge that gap between human beings and artificial intelligence in the business world. Okay. So, congratulations, pat yourself on the back. You have way more value than you probably even realize. And I'll tell you that whether you are searching for a job, you're in a career, and so forth, the value that you bring to your organization, the potential value that you bring is probably 100x what you think it is. Simply, and I'll walk you through exactly why. And by the end of this, what I want you to understand is not only your power, but what you can do to provide value to your current or future employer, your own business, so forth and so on, by leveraging AI. You don't have to be as technical. That's for other people to do. Okay. Anybody any questions thus far?
Yeah, Rob, you said 86% of CEOs support AI. Recent Harvard Business School review article indicated that a much smaller percentage of employees support and understand it.
Correct.
You're going to discuss how, they're going to bridge that gap?
I could talk about so a couple things. One, the reason, so here's a couple things. The 86% is executives, not just CEOs. So executives in the C-suite all report 86% say that AI is critical for the future success of themselves and their business. Only 8% of those executives and organizations are ready to move forward with AI. That delta is the big difference. So, and employees, one of the biggest things of why they are concerned about artificial intelligence is because of the threat that they feel to their position. So I spoke last year. I was a keynote speaker in Las Vegas at something called TechWell, which is one of the largest technology conferences. I spoke about artificial intelligence, if used appropriately, will lead to enhanced IP, your individual potential. How we leverage artificial intelligence from 30,000 feet at the executive level through to the employees is not about taking things away, but empowering them. I'll give you a quick example. Just on a call with a technology company, I met with their executive team. I spoke to one of their executives who spends almost 80 hours a month, him and his team, doing revenue reconciliation. Okay, so now we can leverage our AI to move from instead of 80 hours, we can get that down to maybe about 2 or 3 minutes. That's incredibly value for them because time is money. Initially, that gentleman and those below him on his team were concerned about, well, that just takes my job away. Until I asked him the question, what are you going to do with that extra time? And what that extra time comes back to for them is that they could be more strategic. Okay, they could apply, they don't have to do a lot of the busy work. They can do a lot of the strategic work. Does that answer the question? Is that helpful?
Partially.
Okay, but why? So how we bridge that gap between 30,000 feet executives and 15,000 to zero employees, part of what we do at our organization, and not to be the plug, but that's exactly what Halo does. Halo is a way to bridge the gap between executives so that they make clear, actionable, measurable decisions leveraging AI that then gets passed down to their team where they can implement within their tools and systems. So I'm happy to have additional conversation around that if you want as well. Okay. All right. So as I said, you're the key point of it. So let's jump into what is AI and what AI is not. Okay. So I'm going to talk about it at the top level. Anybody here, I'm assuming everybody here has made chocolate chip cookies before, right? Anyone gets a Toll House chocolate chip bag. On the back of it, it's got a recipe. Start your oven at 350, mix this much flour, this much eggs, put in the quarter cup of chocolate chips. And at the end of it, you get your fresh baked perfect cookie. That's all I want you to think about. That's what AI is. AI is recipes. It's just a big recipe book where it's saying we want the same cookie every single time. So when you think about AI, it is really in that context. It's just a bunch of recipe. It is actually not that intelligent. It's just leveraging different algorithms, which are those recipes, to get to an outcome. So AI is not a technology problem. I don't want you to think about it in that way. But I want you to think about it is that this becomes a leadership decision problem. AI to be successful means that the executives need to have a better understanding about what kind of cookies they want, what kind of recipes they want, so forth and so on. AKA, they need to think about what is the outcome and how do we want to leverage AI. AI is not just the easy button. You've heard quite a lot about AI slop, or that AI is hallucinates and so forth and so on. the more strategic you are and the better data you have, the better outcomes that you can leverage with artificial intelligence. So this ties back to the question that that gentleman just said, is that bottom up AI, those employees that are using small tools for AI, what it does is it creates fragmentation. It creates risks within the organization. And that's what we want to avoid. So this is our thesis, and where we've been successful is we don't look at AI as a bottom-up bolt-on approach. How we look at AI is a top-down built in through the executive team and into the organization. And as I said, everyone on this call is probably the most important piece of that puzzle to have to make that happen. Okay. Because executive first AI, which is where if you can bring it in for the executives, then it cascades down. All of our companies that use AI, their employees use it more successfully, more efficiently. But if you start at the bottom and just bolt on, it's a really hard adoption rate. Employees don't want to do it. They don't want to use it. Okay, so we need to have standards and guardrails and trust before we get to scale. Any questions on this one before I move into what's required of AI?
Hey, so Rob, quick question. How do you manage that, as you mentioned, AI slop or hallucination with your tools? A little
Yeah.
bit of insight
So
to that.
yeah, we're on, and I'm happy to give somebody a demo if you ever want, but we're on the cusp of technology. So what we do is one, instead of leveraging, so if you use an agentic tool like OpenAI, if you use, Claude or something or Perplexity or Grok, the thing about it is it hallucinates quite a lot because it's trying to fill in gaps. It's like the gentleman who just asked, I can't tell who you are. But it's almost like if you and I just go and have a cup of coffee, and as you're asking me questions, I'm just answering you based on my knowledge set. But I don't know enough about you, about your business, your history, your performance. I don't have enough context to be able to really give you the answers you're looking for. So I'll probably be a little fuzzy around the edges. That's how agentic works today, which is why you see hallucinations. We don't do that because for us to deliver AI at scale for executives, we know we need a couple of the C's. We need confidence. That means that the data that we put in, the data that comes out, needs to be accurate, zero hallucinations. We need to have context. It needs to understand everything about you, your business, so forth and so on. And you need to have control. We prepare the information, but the executive makes decisions. Okay. That's very different. So we leverage that in our tool because we know the executives that we work with, the only way that they're going to leverage AI is if they have clarity, context, and control. And that's how we built we build it into our system. There's an AI that we've built in that's our own called Leo. And Leo is basically an AI, it's a consultant that works with if you're marketing, if you're sales, if you're ops, if you're HR, if you're service, your finance. Leo has enough context, clarity, control to help those executives. So we are very, very rigid about
Oh,
no hallucinations. Okay. And this comes back to it. Well, what's required to get there? The first one, data, 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 right? Not all data is the same, but you need data. This is why you are the spot. You are the single point of truth, you being everyone on this call. And I'm going to get into a little bit, but you already know that you control all of the financial data for an organization. And we want to expand that because the way we want to start leveraging AI requires data from these other aspects of the business, marketing, sales, operations, HR. This is the way we give an AI context, but it requires to come back to data. And who always is the person that people trust with data are the financial individuals within an organization. They become the single point of truth. Any questions on that? Perfect. I'm going to move on. So let's talk about executive vision for AI. So if you are an executive team, I encourage you to think about this for yourselves and for your executive team and challenge them to think about this. What do we want and need from AI? Okay, so for example, within the executive team, we want AI to do what? So executive decision areas that we work on are things around strategy, resource planning, performance and reporting, forecasting, risk identification. Okay, those are outcomes of the AI that come back to leveraging the data and the context. Okay, because again, an executive has one job. Their job is to make decisions. Their decisions are going to be around strategy, around operations, and or around resources. In order to leverage AI, that's where data comes into play. And again, you are the single point of truth when it comes to data. And if you're not yet, you should be and will be in the future. Your value is, like I said, 100x what you probably think it is today. Any questions here? No? Perfect. I'm going to keep going on. And don't hesitate. If there's something that I say where you don't understand it, I say too fast, let me know. So let's look at the role of financial data in artificial intelligence. Okay, there's two pieces I want to talk about: critical and evolving. Okay, so let's jump into critical. Okay, so we need to reframe financial data because you are the most governed, because you are the most trusted. You are also the most decision connected. So when we think about data, data is not all equal. Okay, so to the right, you see this big haystack. Okay, we have haystacks all over. In fact, companies use less than 1 to 1.5% of the data that they generate. Insane to me, right? So what we can do with AI is get to the needles, not the haystacks. Okay. And by doing that, we'll talk about orchestration. We'll talk about the need for financial data. And we're saying financial data, it's not just high level, CapEx, OpEx, revenue, earnings. I'm talking about the ability to get granular with the orchestration, the ability to get into very good analytics, very good KPIs. And it comes back to the value that you bring to the table because you look at things not through anecdotal eyes, but through analytical eyes. And that's a key component to make AI work. Okay, and again, AI becomes trustworthy when the financial data provides the grounding truth within the organization. Okay, so let's talk about what that looks like. So this is our framework that we use. So this is what's called Halo. Again, when we connect all the data, we build the brain of the AI. We connect external data from markets, from competitors, industries. It creates a halo around this business. These are the 6 building blocks of every business on earth: finance, marketing, sales, operations, HR, service. And when we talk about data and orchestration, we talk about financial data. Financial data doesn't just live here in finance. Financial data actually lives in marketing and sales and ops and HR and service. And if you're not penetrating that data now, this is the value that you could bring to yourself and to others, is by being able to mine this, by being able to get into where the data is today, where do we need it to go so we can make faster, better decisions that are going to drive an output such as revenue, building better relationships, building our reputation, being able to recruit better, retaining our customers and our people. And that's how revenue happens. Mark mentioned a book that I wrote a couple of years ago called How Revenue Happens. Everybody wants to get to revenue, right? But when I ask the question, well, how do you get there? I get blank stares. People look at me funny, like, we just sell stuff. I'm like, no, that is not how you get to revenue. And if you just focused on revenue, that's a mistake unto itself. Revenue happens when you use marketing to build recognition, when you use business development to build relationships, when you focus your operations to build reputation. Okay, the way you deliver your products, your service will all come into play around how you build your reputation. So I'm sure you're all familiar with things like Google ratings or Yelp or so forth. Okay, the difference between a 4-star and a 5-star in reputation management is roughly 27% of revenue. That 1 star, right? And it's all by the way that you deliver your products and your services. And this is where AI, with your help, remember you said human in the loop plus data, can really get to the fundamental aspects of leveraging that financial data to build your operations, that build your reputation, that again drive back to revenue. Any questions here? Does this all make sense to everybody holistically? This is the holistic way I want you to see your business, because all of these, it's like a pinball. They all bounce around each other. One relates to the other. So companies that we work with that come in, they are looking at, now they can get predictive. They can see with their financial data, they can say, okay, if I spend 3% more on marketing, this is how it's going to affect business development and sales. And if that happens, I know my conversion rates are X, which means I have to hire, I have to recruit, right? And that also becomes problematic because if I don't hire fast enough, I'm going to have an issue with retaining my customers because they're not going to feel the effect. They're going to feel the negative effects of us growing too fast. Okay, so this is all how orchestration works. We'll get into. And I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead, but does anybody have any questions on this at all? I hear someone talking, but I don't know what they're saying.
Hey, Rob,
Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
I understand the capacity for AI to help provide or support decision making. I think the issue that I have right now is envisioning what that could even be like. What is capable, and how do we build what's capable? Because a lot of us probably operate in the day to day and think about the data that we get today, and there is a need to improve that at times or make it more accessible. But what more is there? Like, how do we think in an unconstrained way?
Yeah, absolutely. It comes back to these questions right here. If you try to have conversation around how can we leverage artificial intelligence with our data to make decisions, strategic decisions, resource decisions. So everything from hiring, upsizing, downsizing, right? So it's shocking to me that a lot of companies don't know the difference between growth and scale, right? So when we have conversations with them around, hey, do you want to grow or do you want to scale, right? Until we say, okay, well, growth is just where your revenue is going to increase, as are your operating expenses in a rough way. Scale is where we can increase your margins, right? We can leverage artificial intelligence to scale. Okay, like, okay, that's how we can leverage AI. How do we backtrack? How do we get to that point? So this is where having conversations. I have a whole entire, I'm speaking at Visage in a couple weeks, and I have a whole entire, which I'm happy to share with everybody here, kind of questionnaires on how do you start to create the strategy on how we want to leverage artificial intelligence. So the gentleman that asked that question at the end of this, there's a QR code. If you want to connect with me, I can send you that exercise that you can start having conversations with your team around. But that's exactly it, is how do we leverage artificial intelligence? Yes, we can make decisions, but what decisions? So we have companies using AI today to, again, do forecasting for hiring, reducing turnover, the cost of turnover. They're able to do that. We're talking with very large enterprise companies where, if they buy their meat from a certain farm, and those cows get sick, how can they make operating decisions faster before it affects their CapEx, OpEx, revenue, earnings, and so forth? So those are areas, like I said, you have to get from the Flintstones to Jetsons. You're not going to get there overnight. So you got to start with what is our biggest pain point and where do we want to start leveraging AI, if that's helpful. But anyone that wants to get into the very granularity of AI specifically for their business, I'm happy to meet one-on-one and talk further about that, because I have roadmaps that you can just take it with your team, do it on your own, and then just put it into practice. Okay. Okay. So again, let's talk about evolving the role. Okay, this is where we're going to shift. We want to shift from reporting, right? Reporting is telling us what happened, to orchestration, right? What happens next? So the gentleman just asked that question. This is another piece that you can start leveraging data to do, which is predictive aspects, okay? And not just around financial forecasting, but around all of those other areas of the business, right? When it comes to operations, when it comes to HR, when it comes to service, right? When it comes to being predictive in the way that marketing affects HR, we can talk about all of those by leveraging data. And again, it all ties back to the financial aspect, because that, as I mentioned, time is money. So this is where finance becomes more of the translator, right, between strategy and execution. You're not just a BI tool. You're not just this is a snapshot of what happened. This is one point in time. It's how are we evolving, right? How are we becoming the steward of that system-wide alignment to how we bring AI in and how we use it across the board? So another reason why I may have answered that question a little bit more vague than the gentleman may have wanted is because it becomes specific to the business. Are you a manufacturing business? Are you a service-based business? Are you a technology business? Are you local? Are you regional? Are you national? Are you a multinational? All of that is different. You compare the AI to the anatomy of your business specifically, and it's not very hard to do. But once you're able to do that, this is where the real power of AI comes into place, right? You become the governor of the AI decisions. And as I say here in the bottom in yellow as a key takeaway, you don't lose authority with AI. You gain leverage. That's why I said I see this every single day, right? The people that become the most valuable inside organizations that starts to move from the Flintstones to the Jetsons are on the financial side. They actually need more people on the staff side. And then the operations side, right? It's not sales that becomes the key driver of growth anymore. It's literally those that are closest to the data and those that are closest to the operations. Any questions here?
I have a comment, and it relates to customer service.
Yes, sir.
Large percentage of companies are using it in their customer service. I probably have had 15 interactions in the last 3 or 4 months, and I have not had one good one. And
They're awful.
I'm about ready to, change accounts at the bank or whatnot. Have you run into companies that, have used AI successfully on the customer service side?
Yes, the companies that come in and work with us. And everyone else, no. Literally, we just hired two salespeople that left the company. So again, this is the difference, right? Because companies are starting to leverage AI tools at the bottom level where they're interacting with customers. That's not really helpful to the organization. So they think that hitting the AI, this simple button is, I'm going to bring in, voice and AI for anything from scheduling to client service or customer service and so forth and so on. Very small percentage are doing it well and doing it successfully. The number one reason why is what I said at the beginning. The AI does not have context. It does not have enough information and data to provide good customer service to those people. It's not a problem with the technology. Remember, I said that. It is not a technology problem. It is a context and data problem. And AI companies do not understand that. So instead, what they do is they promise you that they're going to implement a tool like a CS, a tool, whether it's a chat, whether it's a phone bank, whatever the case may be. And the majority of individuals, because I've had it myself, have terrible, terrible outcomes with it. Okay, that's why it's got to be from the top down. How are we leveraging AI strategically? We want to use it to service customers. So we have a company that we're working with right now who is looking at how do they bring in AI chat so that they can scale time on their customer success team, right? But the only way they do that with success is by saying, we want this outcome. And the outcome is tied to data, which is customer satisfaction using that tool. It is net promoter score, right? It is how many recalls do we have as a result of that. So it's not that not that they're using the tool wrong. A lot of companies just implement it because, well, it's AI. They implement it and they never circle back with, is it creating value to our end users? Is it creating value to our organization? Okay. And this ties back to one word, strategy. So I'm going to come back to this, right? Strategy. It's a word like wellness. No one really knows what it means, but I will give you the simplest way to think about strategy. When you think about this question, how do we increase value for customers? How do we increase value for our brand? How do we increase value for our stakeholders? The answer to that is strategy. And if part of that, and I mentioned to you, that's one of the areas that you can implement AI. If one of the strategic questions you're saying is that we can increase value to our customers by implementing an AI tool that answers their questions faster than human can, we can reduce hold times, we can reduce satisfaction. That is how you leverage AI with control, with clarity. Okay. But that's where most organizations don't do that. Does this make sense? I'm going to take it as a yes.
Yes.
Silence is okay. Great. So that's what I said. So yeah, I would say 99% of AI is garbage. And it's not because of the tool. It's because lack of data, lack of context, and lack of strategy from the organization from the top down. And that's why I said you need to move from the Flintstones to Jetsons. You can go a lot faster if you just have a proper plan in place and know why you want to leverage AI. I have conversations with executives all the time where I ask them, well, how do you want to use AI? They don't have an answer. They just think they have to. And by the time we get done, after 15 minutes, they have a clear, actionable, measurable plan to leverage AI within the organization so they can be successful. Okay. All right. So let's talk about reporting to orchestration. This is a really important piece. How am I doing on time here? Okay. I got to move quicker.
You're doing good.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it because I really want to get to the questions too. So let's think about orchestration. Okay. It's a very, lovely word, but let's get down to the root of it. What it means is just using this data, using all the data across the organization to coordinate decisions. And remember, what are the decisions? They're going to be a strategic decision. Strategic decisions drive value. It's going to be a operational decision. How do we execute? Or it's going to be a resource decision, time, money, people. Okay. This is where, when you think about how we make decisions strategically using data and AI as one system, that's the outcome that gets us from the Flintstones to the Jetsons. But again, what is required to do that? Context and data. Who are the key stakeholders of data? You, everyone on this call, every single person on this call is the key to making this happen for an organization. And if your organization does not understand that, it is your job to educate them. You want to keep your value, you want to increase your value, you want to increase your salary and everything else that goes with it. This is exactly how. It's by leveraging data in a way that you can bring orchestration into your organization to help make decisions faster. Okay. And it's all in one intelligent system. That's what you want to do. But you don't want to do it with more meetings, with more spreadsheets, or more guesswork. Okay. So let's talk about a little bit how that works. So if you remember, we talked about the system over here, finance, marketing. Okay. So what changes? We don't want to think about dashboards. Okay. So I just got off a call before this where the company was asking about they use Power BI and so forth. I'm like, Power BI is great. It's a dashboard, but it's not a dynamic system, right? We need to moving from the Flintstones to the Jetsons using data and context, mean that we can go from flat dashboards to dynamic systems. Again, how does this all correlate? What the gentleman that asked the question about service, okay, that was a perfect example. What you gave was an example of I'm assuming it was the bank. I've been calling the bank to get questions. They're sending me into this garbage AI system, and I'm gonna leave. It's gonna cause a retention problem for the bank. I'm gonna bring my money someplace else. So their loss is somebody else's gain. It's gonna affect the reputation of that bank, the relationships they can build. They may have to lay people off, so the recruitment is going to go down. So everything is connected. That becomes a dynamic system. And this is where AI can really work because, to be honest with you, AI thinks faster than we ever can. Okay, that's one of the benefits. Okay, it's like going from, I'm assuming everybody here knows how to ride a bike or has been on a bike. Leveraging AI is just helping you go faster with less effort. It's riding an e-bike, right? It's riding one of those electric bikes. So you don't go 10 miles an hour, you go 30 miles an hour. But you still have to steer. You still have to keep your hands on the steering wheel, right? Or the handlebars. Because if you don't, you're gonna fall, you're gonna get hit in the face, and you're gonna see that everyone's bleeding out because nobody wants to play with your AI tool, your customer service tool. Okay. So again, moving from KPIs to what? Interdependencies, right? These all work together. They're all levers that we can pull. That's how we go from basic insights, which is what a lot of financial executives they deliver. They deliver insights, but really what we want to do is be prescriptive. We want to be predictive. And that's the value of how we can leverage orchestration by having good data. I get this question all the time, but Rob, we have garbage data. I'll tell you a secret. Every single company has garbage data. Every single company. And until you have a framework that is built around a system that helps you focus on what data is important, again, needles, not haystacks, you will always have garbage data. You have to start somewhere. Everybody knows the future is the Jetsons. It is required, the data is required. You have to start somewhere. And that's where focusing on gentlemen asked the question before, how do we decide on where to start? You start on what's the outcome we want for finance, for marketing, for sales, for ops, for service, for HR. You don't have to do it all at the same time. A lot of companies do, but if you want to focus on the biggest pain point, you start there. You break your ankle and you got a toothache. Where do you focus first? Your broken ankle, right? That's exactly what we're talking about. Start with where the biggest pain is and work yourself backwards. And again, if anybody wants to have conversations about it, I'm happy to give you all the tools where you can do it internally as a team. Okay. So you become the conductor. As I said, I've been so excited to talk to you guys because I don't know if you realize it, but you are the key to AI for every organization. Okay. You can get to the point where you can say with certainty, if we pull this lever, here's what will happen. Okay. This will break, this will grow, this will stabilize. Here's the constraint that we need to fix, right? We can focus on the needle, not the haystack. Here's the fastest path to growth, to expansion. to an M&A, right? This is the way we're talking about, right? And this is where AI actually earns its keep, right? What does that mean? It means that when we talked about the human in the loop, when in order for AI to really work, the two of you need to work together. But this is where the AI actually earns its keep. Because if you build it right and it doesn't take a lot of effort, you can get to this predictive place where you become the conductor. Now the strategic value of that AI is so high. So then you don't have, and I'll be honest, we have about 90 some odd percent of the companies that leverage our AI say that they make decisions faster in less time. That's the kind of outcome that you want, not the we implemented this AI call and only 14% of the people said it helped them make a decision or help them, book a meeting, book a service, or get the answer they're looking for. And it's because they don't have context, don't have data. Any questions here?
I got a quick question for you.
Yes,
So,
sir.
as we've all seen, everything is structured around data, the quality of data. I mean, that's the whole emphasis of all of this. You want the right outcomes. The data has got to be good, or it's got to be cleaned and put in the right format. And you're taking it from all these different areas, sales, ops, finance, trying to put it together so that the AI can optimize all of that, right?
Yes.
So that now there's decisions that can be made. So but are we really, so I guess when you're talking about finance people as being kind of the conductors in control, to me, it's still about all the people that manage all the data, your data people. I mean, they've got to get the data right, or me conducting something, I'm going to go off the track. You know what I mean?
I totally agree with you 1,000,000%. Hold on, I'm going to share something real quick. Get out of full screen mode. Come on. Can you guys see my screen okay?
No,
Oh, hold on. Let's see. What happened? You see my screen now?
it's blank.
It's blank. Here, I'm going to share this real quick. What do you guys see on my screen now?
Now we see.
You see
Score.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So, what's the gentleman's name who just asked that question?
This is Matt Gerksness.
Okay, Matt. Okay, so what you're looking at is a single point of truth. This is a spider web that's within the framework that we use, our software. And so you're absolutely right. Those individuals are responsible for the quality of the data. And this is where the orchestration comes together. Because when you set your data points, whatever that means, you connect it to, this is a demo account, but this is connected to HubSpot, this is connected to QuickBooks. You can put any metric you want in this whatsoever, right? But what you're doing, you are the conductor here because you are ensuring that those individuals are paying attention to the data. Where our AI comes in, you'll see Leo right here. So Leo actually scans the data to help you identify how much of this data is nonsense, how much of the data is flawed, where is the anomalies coming from. But you become the orchestra, you become the conductor because usually it's the finance person who is the most accurate when it comes to data, whether it's gross revenue retention, employee retention, client retention, because the individuals that are actually working those different areas, they're not analysts. They don't have the same data-centric eye that you will have. This is why I say it's more valuable because you're able to look at this, put any metric you want in here. It's going to come from a data source that you do not own, just like the conductor of an orchestra. They don't play the violin. They're not the ones playing the flute. They're not playing the drums. You are the one that's telling them what note to play. Does this make sense? That's why, yes, the quality of the data, but it tells you where to focus. It tells you these are the outcomes we're looking for. We want marketing qualified leads, or we want, pipeline value, sales revenue, total revenue. We want, on-time delivery rate, rework. We want this across all of our entire portfolio, whether it's, one location or across all of these different areas. But you become the conductor, right? Because you're basically saying this becomes our single point of truth when it comes to data. And my job is to make sure that everybody else on that team is basically controlling their data accurately because we're using this as the agreement between us and the AI. Does that make sense?
So yeah, so within side of that, like you said, for what you're doing in your systems, is that where agent AIs are being run? to clear things,
Well,
get things correct, and
but that's where, so we have Leo. Leo
yeah,
basically connects to all of your systems. So
right.
it connects to all your systems. So it's basically managing that data stream that's coming to here. But then when you go to do something like, let's say you wanted to run a simple report of, let me do reports. Wasn't my intention to do this, but you want to run a report here. Let's say you want to run a sales performance, right? Or revenue reconciliation. No, I'll just go to something else. Sorry. Let me see. Yeah, you want to run that, then the AI is going to go and grab all that data and from
Right.
your data, and it's going to come out and it's going to give you that analysis. And then you, as the single point of truth person, are going to be able to look at that with Leo and see where are there issues and errors. And here's why you want the errors, because the errors are going to tell you where that team needs to improve, where they need to focus down the path, downstream at 0 feet to correct the data. So by the time it gets to you, it is accurate. That's how you improve data. That's how you go from Flintstones to the Jetsons. It really is that simple. But right now it's overwhelming because you have tons of data. You have data warehouses and data marts and data lakes. But when you start focusing on what are the outcomes we're actually looking for, and then what are the executive data points we need to see, it gives you a starting point, and then everything else fall in line. Is that helpful?
Yeah, very, very.
Okay, and this is how this works, right? So when you go to ask Leo questions, or you ask it to develop a strategic plan, or you ask it to do anything, it's using your information. It's using context around, where we want to be in 3 years. This is where our business is going to be in 3 years. What is the anatomy of our business? What is our core values, our products, our services, our geographic locations? What's our financial performance? Who are the target audiences? This is the context I'm talking about. These are data points that allow the AI and the human beings to move faster. So when you want to ask Leo any question about your business, create a plan, generate a report, when you want to, do any of this stuff, you want to do a tactical plan. It's one click. It's not 3 weeks to go do this, right? It is literally, it's a matter of minutes to get you from the Flintstones to the Jetsons. And this is how, when we talk about orchestration and data, you are the most important piece of having this happen. You don't have to do all the work, but this is why I said you are the conductor. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
This is you. And this is the thing about Halo and what we do. I've had people describe Halo as the Matrix, right? Once you see it, you never see it the same. Every single company, every single person, every single investor says the same things when they see what we're doing, is they understand it and it starts to unlock it. So even as I'm giving you these, giving you recommendations to consider about how much value you have, it sometimes becomes a little bit challenging because you yourself don't have context until you see it in motion. Then you get a better understanding about your personal value to this process and the future of basically every organization around the world. So that's an important piece of it. So this is why I say like your role is evolving. This is where you become the strategic operating partner for the organization. It's a coordination, it's control. This is why I said like you are so precious and so valuable. I want you to go ask for a raise today. But seriously, it's about helping the skills move forward. Everything from systems thinking to scenario analysis, things that you're probably more familiar with than you realize. And it allows this piece too. The gentleman that asked about, employees aren't happy with it. Employees aren't happy with it because they don't quite know exactly how it's going to help them do their job better. If you remember, I said something about 20 minutes ago about your individual potential. Everybody is overworked. They're overwhelmed. They're underperforming. AI actually has the ability to free them up to be more reflective in their job. We see it every single day. The average person works 49 hours a week. That means they work 15 months in a 12-month period, right? AI can truncate that. We can bring it back. We're already doing it with companies, right? We can bring that back so people can actually do what they're built for, which is strategy, control, decision making. And it all starts with you're the gift to move that forward. So let's talk about this. Let's wrap this up and let's get into some conversations and hopefully there's some time for Q&A. So this is something I want you to take away. AI is not going to replace finance. Absolutely not. 100%, it will not replace finance. Don't worry about it. You're not going anywhere. However, the financial leaders who learn to orchestrate AI will replace those who don't. That is a shot across the bow. Okay, because companies are seeing that in order to move from the Flintstones ejection, right? 86% want to get there, 8% are ready. You are the bridge to that future. If you do not start to go deeper into orchestration and AI and think about this holistically, you will be replaced. You will not be the future, you will be the past. Okay? So this is why I embrace you. I encourage you to have conversations, to think about how you want to leverage AI. Yes, you know it's about data, but that's just one piece of the puzzle. It comes back to what we talked about, strategy. It comes back to resource planning. It comes back to all those things around marketing and sales and ops and HR and service and finance. It comes back to what's our objective, what's the outcome, then how do we find the data that makes better decisions? I'm trying to go fast because I'm running a little bit low on time. So I'm happy to share this with everyone. If you want to get together with me personally, you want to have deeper conversations about your organization, you want to ask about AI pertaining to you, you want a demo of what we're building, I'm happy to take that time to if it provides value to you to do that. No obligation. I'm not going to do an ask and so forth and so on. But it's more around what your needs are. Because one of the things I love to do most is helping people understand AI. There's a lot of bad data and a lot of bad information out there. And I would really prefer that you do not travel down a path that is more harmful than helpful. Okay? Any questions?
Rob, this is Matt again. So
Yes, Matt.
when you're thinking about this, and all of us as we're, getting on the cusp of AI, and I'm sure many folks on here are just like myself, where I've delved heavily into Chat GPT and finance prompting, where I've got 400 different finance type prompts that I can work with and do things with. And then you've got people within your organizations that, they're whatever they enjoy, they use Chat GPT, Gemini, Copilot. So you got a mixed bag of people using different LLMs. So
Yep.
so you talk about this orchestration of AI. I'm trying to figure out, how do I professionally get there? Like, from a learning process, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, uh, I'm part of a couple different places of where I'm learning AI, etc., and the concept of it and how it works, but I think that's different than orchestrating it. It's kind of like, I'm almost looking. I think many of us are looking for a path of, like, you're in this every day, right? That's
Mhm.
kind of what you do. But many of us are in this, our roles, right? But we need to be getting this going as well. But we don't really have a path of, like, there's a lot of stuff out there, right? And I can just go, oh, well, let me go look at this and learn this today, right? Or it can be overwhelming, is what I'm getting to, right? So how do
Yeah.
I become more of a consultant, I guess, which I think orchestrating the AI is around, like, oh, I need to go learn this or something. Or
Yeah, so that's a great question. And this is why I brought this up on the screen, which I think actually after this conversation, if anybody wants this, this is what I was delivering to Vistage, by the way. But a big piece of it is I'm gonna help you reframe the way you're looking at AI. When you're using a Chat GPT or a Gemini or so forth, I want you to think about this in different layers.
okay,
30,000 feet is executive strategy. Okay.
yeah,
15,000 to zero is execution. It's doing that work. So what you're working with right now, you are working with those tools for execution purposes, not really for strategic purposes. If you don't have a strategy on how you want to leverage AI, then everything from 15,000 to zero is going to be overwhelming. You're going to think that you can do everything. It's almost like you're going to the world's biggest buffet and you
yeah,
don't know what to pick first, right? And so
yeah,
this is
exactly.
where what we help executives do, even if you're not an executive, we help you kind of narrow the focus, right? We help you focus on what do you need AI to do for yourself. So what you see on the screen here, and I can share this with everybody here. I have a digital version and a print version, but it helps you identify areas of how do we want to, or how do I want to leverage artificial intelligence? What do I want to use it for when it comes to see outcomes and evidence of better decisions? If I were to use it, let's just use for finance. If you just focused here, what do I want it to use? What do I want to leverage AI for? And then how do I know what's the evidence that there's better outcomes for us, right? So if it is looking at, resource planning, again, it's going to come back to strategy, operations, and resources, right? So if you're using it for prompting for forecasting or for data clarity and so forth, that's fine. But I want you to start thinking about it holistically. Otherwise, you'll just drown in all of that 0-foot stuff. So this document here even gives you a very quick assessment on if you are ready for AI and where you need to be ready for AI. So then you can make decisions on this is where we are today. We're not ready. We're somewhat ready. We are ready. But what it does is that it gives you a chance for yourself to reflect on what kind of relationship do you want to have with AI for yourself, for your organization. So you start there, you start at the top, and then you can make decisions, right? Like I said, go to a buffet. I mean, I'm a fat kid, always has been. I love eating cookies. When I go to a buffet, I got to pick what I'm going to choose to eat, right? I can't eat everything. And that's how you got to look at AI. You can't do everything. You can only put so much on your plate, and it's got to be the most nutritious for you. Is that helpful?
Now, very, very much. I think, it's the overwhelming thought, but really you can gear it down to specific components within the organization, and they don't have to incorporate everything. You are right there, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to start with them all. You can work,
No.
right?
No. And this is where usually when we go into organizations, each executive needs to define how they want to leverage AI for themselves and their team in relation to creating value for the organization. That's the strategy. So we focus on decision making because that is what an executive is meant to do. Bring clarity and confidence to make a decision, whether it's around, marketing, sales ops, HR service, and finance. But we have to have proof. You have to have an objective. Okay. Here's your objective. Here's the outcome, right? So if we think about that, if we started on the bookends, here's our objective. This is where we want to go. This is the outcome. This is where we want to end up, right? Then you'll know how to you'll basically know what to do in between. If I tell you, hey, Mark, let's go drive from New York to California, we have an objective and we have an outcome, right? And then we're going to have to identify, well, what car do we want to drive? How much gas money do we have to have? Where are we going to sleep? So forth and so on. But that makes it so much easier than saying, Mark, let's just get in a car and drive, right? You don't have any destination. You have to have destinations for all of these areas to make it work. And whoever said that, you can start with where you're comfortable. Start with finance, start with HR, start with ops, depending on your business. I mean, we got manufacturing companies who leverage AI to ensure that, be tracking their systems uptime and downtime and how that relates to and the correlation with overtime, right? So they can control their hours based on looking at data around the performance of their manufacturing tools, right? That's stuff that they were never able to do before, but it's because they have a pain point. They have an end result they want to get to. We don't want to pay as much in overtime. And why are they paying as much overtime? Because we had a lot of downtime with these machines. It took longer to change over for manufacturing, right? They could look at that data and then make a decision. Okay. I know it's overwhelming. And yes, I have the benefit where I live and breathe this, and I have. But one of my favorite things to do is help you get clarity along this path. I don't care if we never do work together. I don't care if we never use Halo, because I know what you're trying to get to. I know how much value you have. And that is my intention of why I'm talking here. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, very much. Thank you.
And I'm happy to distribute all this, but I encourage everyone on this call, don't get so ingrained in the 15,000 to 0 with, prompt engineering and, ChatGPT versus Perplexity, or using this tool or Agent AI. Elevate yourself to where you belong, which is start at the top, start at 30,000 feet, look down on where you want to go, and then plan the route to get there. That's how you leverage AI. Any other questions?
So, Rob, this is Omar. So, is Halo an AI platform which sits on top of the various ERP and source systems, or how do you look at Halo?
Yeah, so Halo is again holistic alignment. So nothing sits above Halo. Literally, we sit on top of an organization. So we build the brain of the AI into each one of the businesses. So let's just say there's 100 people on this call, 100 different businesses. Each business gets its own AI brain. Okay, so when you think about ChatGPT that only knows a little bit about you or your business. With Halo, it learns everything about your business, all of the anatomy, your target audience, the analysis of the business, and it doesn't forget. Then we connect to all your systems and data. So we connect to your ERPs, your accounting software, your HR software, your marketing software, Salesforce, HubSpot. We can connect to about 600, 700 different APIs. That data gets streamed up. So now the AI and the organization can see all of their data, plus they have this framework, right? They have this idea, the brain that understands it. Then we do one more thing. We connect outside data. That's what's called Pulse. So all the data that can affect your business, markets, competitors, industry, tariffs, all of that data floods into the system. So now the executive has context and the AI has context and data. With that, now we can start making decisions. Now we can start orchestrating. Now we can start pulling levers around what happens if I do this on marketing? How does that affect sales? What happens if I do that, and how's it going to affect retention? Okay, so Amazon ran into this problem. And again, we're for small businesses and large businesses. We've tested this with tons. Amazon, this is a great example. They invested $4 billion in one quarter because they had 180% turnover. They had a retention problem with their staff. They're replacing their staff every 6 months. And it wasn't about recruiting or retention. It was affecting their reputation. People were buying from Walmart instead of Amazon because orders were wrong. They weren't delivered on time. And that was affecting revenue. So they're able to see that clearly now. But that's exactly the orchestration piece, pull levers.
So another just a follow-up question, because in an organization, you don't get data that clean, right? There are manual processes, Excel spreadsheets, source system kind of stuff, a lot of manipulation happening. So before you, install this AI platform, do you go down in details at the task level, automating it and standardizing it and all that process that needs to go in place as well? Or how
Yeah,
do you?
so part of the first thing we do when we work with an organization is we do a tech analysis. We see what data sources they have, and we see where their data is. So if you use, some companies will use Excel spreadsheets, they don't use an actual tool. So we have an SQL agent, we'll just pick up that Excel document, bring it into the system. It also allows us then to work on data improvement, where you are today and where you want to go. Again, marathon, not a sprint. Everyone knows their data is garbage, but let's focus on the areas that create the most impact. So what it does is saying, we're not going to correct all your data right now. We're going to focus on the one that's going to drive the most impact for the organization. And then you start clipping it off. So we have companies that have been in Halo for 2 years, 3 years, that they're correcting their data, but they started with the ones that are most impactful. Because again, this is 20, 30 years of bad data. So, they have to, but now they can finally correct it. Everyone just thought, well, everyone's got bad data, so it's okay. But wait a minute, now everybody wants to use AI, but we need better data. So where do you start? And that's Halo. We bridge that gap.
Great,
We
thank you.
bridge that gap. No, absolutely. But I get that question, and I will tell you, hundreds of companies, thousands of executives, everyone says the same thing. Every question that you've all asked today is what company executives from 5, 6, 7, $8 billion companies ask and have the same exact questions. Everyone is the same. Everyone is exactly the same. You have to get there. You have to improve your data. You don't have to do all of it at once. You got to focus on what's going to drive what's going to drive the most value for you today. Does anybody want a copy of this assessment for yourselves too?
If you send
Great.
it to me, I'll send it out.
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely. Any other questions? I know we're out of time, but I'm happy to hang out for a little bit longer if anyone's got more questions.
Rob, I'm curious. This is Mark. Rob, I'm curious, how long of a process is it to implement something like this?
Yeah, so for most organizations, we ask for a 90-day onboarding, and we can onboard faster. But what we do when we work with an organization is we work with the executives to identify What are the outcomes you're looking for with AI? Where is the data? And then we build those connections. So if anyone's here in the Valley, you'll be familiar with like a brand like George Brazil. Anybody here never know George Brazil? Okay. George Brazil, they just came on. They started in January 1. We're already, what are we in February 1? We've already connected most of their data from a lot of their systems. We've already built in, they did their entire year strategic plan in about 40 minutes, where it used to take them 3 days to do it because of the clarity and so forth and so on. So, but we asked for 90 days because executives get busy, they take vacations, they do all that stuff. So usually about 90 days to turn it all on.
What about, Rob, what about maybe we don't know specifically what we want to get out of it, but we know we need it. We know we need to be competitive.
Yeah.
Are you going to share that knowledge base to like, hey, this is where you should look at it. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, that's what part of our customer success team, me included, is where we work with the executives to help you identify, right? We're not, again, I always use this term going from the Flintstone suggestions. If we just said, hey, good luck, you're never going to get there. So we become essentially that portal. The part of the job of our customer success team is to help guide you to get closer to that, right? To move closer towards that end result. So we don't just throw you into the mix. That's why we're not a traditional software company, where it's just like, you come in and do it, you're gone. No, this is an operating system specifically for the executives that's built into the organization that requires us to guide you. So that's that consultative piece that we just include as part of the process.
So,
And then we also meet with you on a quarterly basis if you need.
so in a mid-sized company, right?
Mhm.
You've got data people, you've got CTO, whoever, right? And this platform's on top of everything. Um, who's the ultimate owner of it?
Usually, yeah, yeah. So it's owned and managed by either the COO or the CFO.
Okay,
More times it's the chief operating officer because that's their job is to make the trains run on time and so forth and so on. But ultimately, each executive is logging in and using their part of the update. So we have a lot of companies that will do. Yeah, we have so many companies that have left like EOS. So they'll want to have their ELT meetings, right? But their ELT meetings go from 90 minutes to 20 minutes every 2 weeks. And it's just making sure that everyone stays in alignment. But accountability is for everyone on the exec team. But anyone that wants to, for some companies, they want their CIO or CTO to manage it because they're data heavy. So it just
right.
depends what the executives decide. Sometimes it's even managed by an executive assistant just to make sure that everything's running fine. But we stay on top of it. We don't just walk away. That's a big part of how we work with Works,
Thank you.
Yeah,
large and small.
yeah, Rob, this is Ganesh here. One question. Uh, do you also get a benchmark data, like if you're in a healthcare industry or a certain type of industry? So can we get as a benchmark data?
We can. And in fact, that's one of the things that our new version is. So one of the things we're getting into predictive, so Monte Carlo scenarios, if you will. So a lot of that is ASU approached us to work together on this. But part of it is using benchmark data. So what we're building ultimately also is this neural network, which essentially eventually will have thousands of companies on it. So we can see clearly in terms of benchmarking, this is how others in your industry are performing, or this is what they did to increase performance by X, Y, or Z. And that's how we're leveraging the future of AI as well. Because what I really want to do, I want to reduce the amount of failure for business. I mean, that's just my personal driver is, hey, can we prevent companies from actually turning over and making them make better decisions? I do that because I've had a personal relationship with that. My father was a great physician, terrible at business. We lost everything. And so for me, I would love to be able to ensure that small businesses specifically, that they have every tool they need to be successful. And that
Thank you.
requires benchmarking. Hope I'm not sharing too much, but I just talk. Any more questions? Okay.
Anyone
Mark?
else? Yeah, thank you, Rob. I think sounds like we covered the gamut today. So Charlotte will make the slides, we'll make the handout that was asked about available to everyone. And we'll look forward to seeing everyone again on March 3rd. We'll announce what that topic and presenter is doing in the next couple of weeks.
And thank you very much for the time. By the way, I also just saw on my phone that I have a flurry of different meetings that were already set by a bunch of individuals in the group. So the more the
Great.
merrier. The more the merrier. If you have questions, no obligations. Happy to answer questions to help you move forward.